The sun of Arizona was merciless that afternoon, painting the horizon in shimmering waves of heat that seemed to make the land tremble. Elias Carter rode slowly, letting his horse pick its way across the dry earth. His ranch was small and lonely, tucked far from town, and he had grown used to the silence that surrounded him. Once, he had known the laughter of children and the soft presence of a wife who stitched quilts by lamplight. Illness had taken them both in a single cruel season, leaving Elias with nothing but his cattle, his memories, and the wide, endless desert. It had been nearly 3 years since that loss, and though time dulled the sharpness of grief, it did not erase it. Every morning Elias saddled up, herded cattle, mended fences, and tried to find meaning in work that now felt like a routine to keep loneliness from strangling him. His hands were weathered, his face lined by sun and sorrow, but his eyes remained watchful. The frontier demanded alertness. It was not only the land itself that could kill a man, but also the people who wandered it. Elias had seen enough to know peace was fragile, especially in these borderlands where settlers and native tribes lived uneasily side by side. That day, Elias was riding toward a patch of cottonwoods near the edge of his property. Some of his steers had strayed that way, and he meant to drive them back before nightfall. His horse snorted, uneasy, and Elias slowed, scanning the distance. The cottonwoods stood out like green shadows against the pale desert, their leaves rustling faintly in the hot wind. There was something odd in the stillness, something that made the hair rise on the back of his neck. He nudged his horse forward, squinting against the glare until the shape came into focus. At first, Elias thought it was a scarecrow, an old figure tied up to keep birds away from crops. But as he drew closer, his stomach twisted. Hanging from a branch of the largest cottonwood was the limp body of a young girl. She swung slightly, her bare feet dusty, her arms bound cruelly behind her back. The sight stopped Elias cold. He dismounted quickly, heart hammering. The girl's dark hair, tangled and matted with dirt, framed a face that was bruised and bloodied, yet unmistakably alive. Her chest rose faintly, almost imperceptibly. She was not dead, not yet. Beneath her chin hung a rough plank of wood, tied with rope. The words burned into its surface made Elias's blood run cold. "White man don't forgive." The letters were jagged, carved with anger and meant to sear themselves into any who saw. Elias stared at them, the message clear as the desert sky. Someone had wanted her suffering to serve as a warning, a cruel piece of theater staged for men like him. For a long moment he could not move. The girl could not have been more than 12. The brutality of it struck him in a way no battlefield or barroom brawl ever had. Shaking himself from shock, Elias drew his knife and cut the rope that bound her wrists. She sagged into his arms, light as a bundle of sticks. Her skin was hot with fever, her lips cracked, her breath shallow. Whoever had left her here had not meant for her to survive. Elias lowered her gently onto the ground and untied the sign from her neck, tossing it aside with disgust. He poured a little water from his canteen onto a cloth and pressed it to her lips. She swallowed weakly, eyes fluttering open just for an instant, dark with fear and pain. Then she slipped back into unconsciousness. Elias's hands trembled as he lifted her onto his horse. He had no plan, no clear idea of what this meant for his quiet life, but he knew one thing: he could not leave her. The desert was harsh enough for a healthy man. For a wounded child, it was a death sentence. He mounted carefully, holding her against his chest, and turned his horse back toward the ranch. Every hoofbeat sounded louder than it should, echoing with the weight of what he had just stumbled upon. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled lazily in the sky, as though mocking the fragility of the scene below. The ride back felt longer than usual. Elias's mind spun with questions. Who had done this? Settlers with a grudge, a vigilante mob seeking revenge for some offense, or perhaps outlaws who cared nothing for sides, only for cruelty. The sign's words haunted him. He had known anger between white settlers and the Apache before, but this was not war. It was something uglier. It was vengeance without honor, cruelty without sense. He tightened his hold on the girl, as though his arms alone could shield her from whatever shadows lingered out there on the plains. By the time he reached his ranch, the sky was deepening into shades of crimson and gold. He carried the girl inside, laying her gently on the spare bed in the corner of the small cabin. The place was modest: wooden walls, a stove, a table, shelves lined with tools and supplies. Elias fetched water, washed her wounds as best he could, and bandaged them with strips torn from an old shirt. She stirred faintly but did not wake. He sat beside her, the lantern's light flickering across her battered face, and for the first time in years he felt the sharp tug of responsibility for another soul. Sleep did not come easily that night. Elias sat by the window, watching the desert stretch endlessly beneath the stars. Coyotes yipped in the distance, their cries carrying on the wind. His thoughts returned again and again to the girl's face, to the cruel message burned into the wood. The world outside his lonely ranch had intruded violently, and he knew there was no ignoring it. Whoever had left her to die might come looking, or worse, might already know she had been found. Still, Elias made a silent vow: as long as she lay under his roof, no harm would reach her. Morning came with pale light and the smell of dust drifting through the cracks in the cabin walls. Elias rose warily and checked on the girl. Her breathing was stronger, her color less ghostly. He fed her a little broth, coaxing her to swallow, and though she remained weak, there was life in her yet. He felt a stir of relief, tempered by unease. If she survived, questions would have to be answered, hers and his. But for now, all that mattered was keeping her alive. He stepped outside, the vast desert spreading out before him, and realized that his life of quiet solitude was over. The desert night was quiet when Elias saddled his horse, the moon casting long shadows across the sand. He moved with the practiced silence of a man who had spent years alone, but his heart beat louder than he wished. The girl slept in his cabin, her breath shallow yet steady, and though she had not spoken much, the fragments of her story were enough to make Elias's blood boil. Men had done this. Not hunger, not wild beasts, not the land itself. Men, settlers, and hired hands who had decided her people's lives were worth nothing. Elias knew their kind all too well. He rode with his rifle slung across his back, the leather creaking in the cool night air. Every hoofbeat echoed against the silence, and with each step Elias felt the weight of what he was about to do. For years he had lived away from men, avoiding the disputes of town, keeping his distance from politics and blood feuds. He had told himself it was better to stay quiet, to let others fight their battles. But as he thought of the girl's bruised face, her small body trembling under his blankets, he felt shame. Silence, he realized, was its own kind of cruelty. The town lay several miles east, a scattering of saloons, shops, and law offices clinging stubbornly to the edge of the desert. Elias had ridden there many times for supplies, rarely staying long enough to trade more than a few words. Tonight, as the lights of lanterns appeared faintly on the horizon, he felt the distance close in his chest. The men he sought would likely be there, drinking away their cruelty. Proud of the fear they had sown, he had no proof, no names, only the girl's broken whispers and the message on that sign. Yet Elias knew. Some things did not need proving. The first building he reached was the saloon, its porch crowded with cowans laughing too loudly, spitting tobacco into the dust. Elias tied his horse to the post, his hand brushing the worn handle of his revolver as he stepped inside. The air reeked of whiskey and sweat, the sound of piano keys jangling beneath drunken voices. He scanned the room slowly, his eyes landing on a group of men near the back. They sat apart, boasting with the kind of arrogance that clung to those who believed themselves untouchable. Elias recognized one of them, a ranch foreman known for hard hands and harder words. He walked to the bar, ordered a whiskey he barely tasted, and kept his ear turned toward their table. Snatches of conversation floated over: talk of land, of driving out vermin, of making examples. His jaw clenched. It was them. The girl's suffering was a scar they had carved deliberately, a warning meant to spread fear across the desert. Elias felt his pulse pound in his temples. He was only one man outnumbered, but he had lived long enough to know courage was not measured in numbers. Sometimes it was simply doing what no one else dared. One of the men noticed him watching and sneered. "Something on your mind, Carter?" His voice carried, silencing the piano. Elias stood, finishing his drink slowly before setting the glass down. "I found what you left hanging in the cottonwoods," he said evenly. The room went still. The foreman's smirk faltered. A few others shifted uneasily, while one chuckled darkly, as if amused by the challenge. Elias did not reach for his revolver yet. His words were his weapon now. "She's alive," he continued, "and she's under my roof. No child deserves what you did. No man with a soul could call it justice." The silence stretched, broken only by the creak of a chair as one of the men stood. His hand rested on his pistol, eyes narrowing. "You should have left her where she was, Carter. You think you can save her. You think you can save any of them." His words dripped with contempt. Elias's own hand moved slowly to his sidearm. "I'm not here to save them all," he said, "just to stop you." The room erupted before the last word left his lips. Gunsmoke filled the air, chairs crashed, voices shouted. Elias fired with deadly precision, years of practice in his hand, dropping 2 men before they cleared their holsters. The fight was quick, brutal, the kind that left no room for hesitation. Elias dove for cover behind a table, splinters flying as bullets tore through wood. He rose, aimed, fired again. The foreman clutched his chest, eyes wide with disbelief, before collapsing. The others scattered, wounded or fleeing, the bravado gone from their faces. When the smoke cleared, Elias stood alone, chest heaving, revolver warm in his grip. The saloon was silent save for the ragged breaths of the few who had survived, too broken to rise. Elias holstered his gun, his voice low. "This ends now." He left the saloon without looking back, mounting his horse as whispers spread through the town. Some would call him a murderer, others a fool. But Elias did not care. He had seen too much to pretend anymore. The girl had given him purpose, not by asking, but by surviving. She was proof that innocence could endure even in the face of cruelty, and that was something worth defending. He rode hard through the night, the desert winds whipping against his face, eager to return before danger found its way to his cabin. When he arrived, the girl was awake. Her dark eyes followed him as he entered, filled with questions she did not yet have the words to ask. Elias knelt beside her, setting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're safe," he whispered, though he knew safety was a fragile thing. She studied him for a long moment before speaking her name, Tayan. Her voice was soft, broken, but steady. It was the first sign of trust, a bridge between their worlds. Elias felt something stir in his chest, something he had not felt since his own family lived a reason to keep fighting. Over the following days, Elias taught Tayan how to tend the garden, how to feed the horses, how to patch the roof when the wind tore shingles loose. She was quiet, watchful, but eager to learn, her strength returning with each passing sunrise. In the evenings, she would sit by the fire, and slowly, piece by piece, her story emerged. She spoke of her father, proud and strong, who had refused to abandon their land. She spoke of the night riders who came, torches in hand, and of the screams that tore the desert apart. Elias listened in silence, his heart heavy, his anger smoldering. Yet amid the sorrow there was resilience in her. She laughed once, a sound so unexpected it startled Elias. She found joy in the smallest things, the warmth of bread fresh from the stove, the way the stars blanketed the sky without end. Elias realized then that he had not only saved her, she had, in a way, saved him. The loneliness that had bound him for years began to loosen, replaced by a bond forged in fire and pain. He no longer rode the land with only ghosts for company. He had Tayan, and with her a new kind of family. Still, danger lingered. Word of the saloon gunfight spread fast, and Elias knew men would come for him. Some out of vengeance, others for bounty, still others simply for the thrill of blood. But he no longer feared solitude or death as he once had. He had a purpose now. As long as Tayan needed him, he would stand between her and the cruelty of the world. Each day he repaired his rifle, sharpened his knife, and prepared for the fight he knew was coming. The desert was unforgiving, but so was the heart of a man who had finally found something to protect. One evening, as the sky burned with the colors of dusk, Tayan asked softly, "Why did you help me?" Elias paused, gazing at the horizon. His voice was rough but honest. "Because once I had a little girl of my own, and because no one should be left to die on a tree." Tayan nodded, understanding more than her years should have allowed. She leaned against him, her small frame warm beside his. For the first time in a long while, Elias felt peace, not the peace of silence, but the peace of knowing he was no longer alone.